Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual panel discussion focused on parole, pardons, and commutations in our criminal justice system. Before we begin tonight, I would ask that we all take a moment of silence in honor of Ernest Johnson. Let us all remember the quote from Desmond Tutu that says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." A moment of silence, please. Thank you, everyone. Well, welcome to the topic that is essentially the conversation about mercy in our criminal justice system. This is the sixth in a series of 8 virtual panel discussions hosted by Nebraskans for Prison Reform and Stand In for Nebraska. These panels occur bi-weekly, and we have 2 more that will finish up by early November. We hope that you will join us for our last 2 topics, which will be restorative justice and community activism. My name is Dr. Brashani Reese, and I'm a public speaker for ending life sentencing, an advocate for restorative justice practices, and I am your facilitator for this evening's discussion. Just a few logistics as we go into this. As an attendee, your sound and your video is automatically muted, but feel free to utilize the chat window and the Q&A feature, which can be found at the bottom of the screen for any questions that you may have. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please private message our Zoom host, Ashley, from Nebraskans for Prison Reform. You may have also noticed that we are streaming live on Facebook, and the session is being recorded, will be available for future viewing. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our esteemed panelists. We have with us tonight Alexandra Bailey from the Sentencing Project. Alex is the End Life Imprisonment campaign strategist for the Sentencing Project, and she supports state and local advocates working to challenge the nation's life sentencing laws. Her priorities include supporting efforts to end life without parole, capping maximum penalties at 20 years, promoting second look provisions, and fostering a culture shift that rejects excessive punishment in favor of restorative approaches to public safety. Welcome, Alex. We have with us Lewis Reed from Reform Alliance. Lewis Reed is the Senior Director of Membership and Partnerships for the Reform Alliance. He is known for his criminal justice expertise, policy advocacy, public health campaigning, and personal impact. He was previously the Director of National Organizing and Partnerships for Dream Corps Justice, formerly known as Cut 50. He served nearly 14 years in federal prison and several years on supervision. Welcome, Lewis. We have Donna Robinson for Release Aging People in Prison, also known as RAP. Donna is the Western New York regional organizer for RAP. She began advocating for the rights of incarcerated people in Western New York with Prisoners Are People Too. That's the name of the organization. Prisoners Are People Too. She has a daughter serving 15 years to life in New York State. And following the death of one of her daughter's mentors, Valerie Gator, after 40 years of confinement, Donna has been working to prevent this from happening to others. Welcome, Donna. And we also have Rafael Robles. Rafael is a formerly incarcerated Nebraskan who received parole and is thriving in our community. Welcome back following his incarceration. Welcome to everybody. Each of our panelists are going to speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then, as always, we will close out tonight's conversation with a Q&A session. Feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom. We do have a chat moderator who will be moderating those questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So thank you for everyone for bearing with me as I sort of tongue-tied through that. It's an emotional moment. For those of you who don't know, Ernest Johnson was executed approximately 37 minutes ago. The Supreme Court refused to step in and intercede on his behalf of a stay of execution. And so it's a little bit of a heavy night. Appreciate all of you and your patience. With that, I am now going to turn the mic over to our first panelist. Alex, would you be so kind as to kick us off tonight?
Absolutely. And yes, it is a heavy night, but it also is the right night to talk about the injustice that we perpetuate in a system that we have named as the center of right within our government, even though it seems it doesn't quite go that way. So my name is Alexandra Bailey. I lead the Sentencing Project's campaign to end life imprisonment. And my goal is to decarcerate. In thinking about probation and parole, I was really wondering kind of how I wanted to talk about this. And I think I want to take you with me to Michigan and talk about a friend of mine named Jamie. Jamie has been incarcerated for almost 28 years. He committed his felony as a youth. He was convicted at the age of 19, and he committed a capital offense. He has spent his time in prison, improving himself in ways that are simply incredible. During his time at various correctional facilities around Michigan, he gained a BA in criminology. The people who ran the prison said that he would earn that degree over their dead body. But nonetheless, he earned his BA. He then went on to get an MBA. And he was recently accepted to the Chicago School of Theological Studies, their seminary, to get a Master's of Divinity. And he does all of this education by correspondence, meaning they send him mail of his homework. He does all the mail and mails it back, and this process continues. That takes a great deal of discipline. There are no classrooms for him. There's nobody to reach out to with questions. This is all Jamie and a desk. He received a scholarship to attend the Chicago Theological Seminary, which was written, his letter of recommendation, one of them was written for him by Angela Davis from her perch at UCLA. His sentencing judge has written for him to be both released via parole, as well as written him recommendations to attend the schools that he has attended. He has a list of recommendations from religious figures across the state of Michigan that is about the size of a Bible. And he is truly a brilliant person. I had the unfortunate blood pressure raising experience of reading his parole packet. So after all of these accomplishments, somebody who has behaved perfectly in prison, who serves as a mentor, who works on the re-entry with other prisoners, is at the lowest threat level within the Michigan Department of Corrections, and a person who is actually more educated than myself, applied for parole. In his parole packet, the Senate minority leader asked that he be released, as did the pastors who had written so many of his letters of recommendation. The Chicago Theological Seminary said that they would take responsibility for him if the parole board would allow him to be released into their custody, that they would provide him with housing and take responsibility for him. You flip to the last page of this packet and you look down and it says, not interested. That's it. Not interested. The parole board is not interested at this time. This story to me, yeah, I know, doesn't that raise your blood pressure? That just raises your blood. You can do nothing but shake your head. You can do nothing but shake your head. Not interested. There is no further explanation. There are no next steps. They are simply not interested in somebody who during the course of 27 years has educated himself to nearly the highest level that anybody can achieve, let alone somebody who is incarcerated. Somebody whose family members are still living and active in their life, somebody who also has run organizations within and outside of the prison to try to alter laws. He actually took a stab at writing legislation for second look, which is something that we're currently working for in Michigan while he was on the inside. And the parole board is not interested. I really don't think I need to go into too much depth about the parole system after sharing that story with you, because I feel that that is a story that everybody on this panel is going to share to some effect, because this is what happens all the time. Parole is a broken system in America, but it is a system that we currently rely on for people to be released from jail. In most states, parole boards are made up of people appointed by the governor. There is no specific qualification in most states. There is no specific level of education or understanding in most states. One of my favorite anecdotes is in the state of New Jersey. I actually had the privilege of having lunch with the former head of parole in New Jersey. One of the greatest jokes is that Chris Christie's driver, his chauffeur, was appointed to the parole board in New Jersey for a number of years. Again, I think this says more than any statistic about where parole is at in America. The people who are appointed are often appointed without appropriate understanding of what this means, without appropriate education, without appropriate education around trauma. And they are able to make decisions that deeply affect people. In New Jersey, to that end, there was an 85-year-old man who recently came up for parole, and he was kicked down for another 15 years before he can be heard for parole again. So what does this all come to? I think what this comes to is the fact that parole is broken, and it serves as one of the few mechanisms that most states have for people to be released from prison, people who have served long and indeterminate sentences. From all the parole hearings that I have heard, it usually ends up being something akin to a second trial, where the one thing that the person in prison can do nothing about, which is the original crime, is played all over again. And what we are not listening to, what we are not paying attention to, is how much they have changed over the course of decades. And what people on the inside then have to navigate is a procedural vortex in order to get their parole hearing. In states like Georgia, the rate of people on probation is actually more than double of every other state's level of probation. So even if people get out, they're then sucked into another system that I believe is marked by a pettiness that is absolutely intent upon sending them back to jail. Not allowing them to be around people who also have a criminal record, which in some families and some communities who are overly policed is almost an impossible ask. Allowing them, demanding that they establish a home and a job with next to no resources or help if they do not have familial help. Probation fees going unpaid then serve as another burden for communities who have already left prison with nothing to have to contend with. A good friend of mine, David Garlock, who works for Straight Ahead in Pennsylvania, only recently gained his freedom from Alabama and was paying exorbitant fees every month simply to be the father, advocate, and upstanding, well-educated citizen that he is. Probation has shown to be effective for only about 2 years. And that is usually in extreme cases where people need help. I always wonder personally why we make people write reentry plans in order to gain their freedom, only to sort of put them in this other prison where they can't travel out of the jurisdiction that they've been assigned to. I've dealt with many women whose children are living with relatives outside of the jurisdiction that they have to remain in because of their probation, who then do the thing that I believe any loving mother would do, which is try to reestablish their relationship with their children, only to get caught and be threatened or returned to prison. I personally, I call this just correctional control. Whether they are controlling where you eat, sleep, and live behind bars, or whether you are looking over your shoulder, in some cases for the rest of your life, because in some states like Pennsylvania, and I've met a number of people who are on probation for the rest of their life, that will not end for them. That it's just another type of prison that does not allow people to re-enter society. If they have paid their debt, why are they paying again? Is always the question that I come to. And when it comes to parole, I meet people like Jamie Mead every single day, people who've spent years behind bars, who have done more than I think anybody could have asked of them in terms of self-improvement, taking of responsibility, restorative justice, serving as a role model for other people in prison, actively working and building relationships. And I actually have a tea cozy that was knitted for me by Jamie, actually on my table over there, to say thank you for corresponding with him. Yeah, so he knits as well, in addition to being more educated than me. I can't knit. Much to my grandmother's dismay. So I think what we're dealing with here is just another aspect of a broken system, often staffed by people who are not qualified. In places like New Jersey, there's not even an exam that everybody has to take in order to be members of the parole board, meaning that the decisions that happen by the parole board are often not particularly guided, but are arbitrary. There's not a standard method. There's very rarely a presumption of release, which should be in place for people who are elderly, since they serve absolutely no threat to society, just like the 85-year-old man who's been kicked down for another 15 years before he once again can apply for parole. I think, and then we have sort of the other flip side of this coin. States that have abolished parole, which unfortunately has not solved the problem either, because the carceral system is designed to hurt, and it seems that, and no matter which way you fashion it, it seems to continue to hurt. 1 in 7 people in the state of Virginia are serving a life sentence, and Virginia abolished parole in 1995. I don't know if you've been following the governor's race recently, but there have been commercials put out by the GOP candidate claiming that people who get out on parole are going to be dangerous and make the streets and life dangerous for folks, which is interesting because he doesn't seem to know that his state abolished parole in 1995. Virginia celebrates its recidivism rates or its lack thereof, but they've never actually tested them because they don't let anybody out of jail. It's almost impossible to do. The governor, the current governor, has only commuted 7 people. All of them were dead. They were pardoned posthumously. So when they abolish parole, there still is not a better mechanism that is put in its place, which is why many people continue with it. This is sort of the argumentation that the Sentencing Project has put forward to use Second Look. And Second Look is a mechanism where people can apply to their sentencing judge for a reduction in sentence that would either greatly reduce their sentence and or allow them to come home. We've statistically found that judges overall have been more reasonable, and if they're not, in many places they're elected, so we can do something about that. Unfortunately, parole boards are appointed, and they act like appointed bodies. In the state of Michigan, we are working to make the parole board a civil service board, whereby they too will have to run for the privilege of that office. They will have to show expertise in that area in order to have the say over people like Jamie, that they simply cannot say that they are simply not interested in a man like his rehabilitation. What I've often dealt with many friends in my community is very unreasonable requests of them when they are finally released from prison. And they, because of that, they disproportionately have their ability to come home revoked. We have, in my hometown of Washington, D.C., where I live, we have Ward 2 mutual aid funds that we raise every month just to pay people's fees, to be able to stay home and not be returned simply because they are poor. But as we know, everything about the carceral system is designed to burden the poor and to further break families apart. And it also seems that there's nobody who is exempt from this. I don't know if you guys read that Pennsylvania tried to revoke Meek Mill's probation. I don't know if you all read about that. So there's nobody, no matter how large or famous, that has touched this system that is sort of beyond its great arms of reach. I suppose in summing up, what I really want to say is that probation as a system punishes people twice, is, as I said, an unbelievably petty system, a fines and fees system designed to return people to prison. And that when it comes to parole boards, I would love to say that while it is funny that, you know, the governor's chauffeur was appointed to the parole board, I am absolutely sure that everybody who came before the parole board during that time did not find it funny. And that people who are not qualified, who do not understand making life or death decisions, because that is what a life sentence is. It is a slow death sentence. I'm sure they didn't find it funny at all. It is time for us to radically change what parole is if we indeed intend to keep that as our system. And it is time that there are requirements for release. There should be a percentage that they have to reach of people that they have to allow out every year. In the state of Alabama, I believe in the last couple of months, we had about 90 people come up for parole, somewhere in that neighborhood. One was released. And we see these kind of numbers everywhere. What people don't know is that the people applying for parole are often people like Jamie, people who have done absolutely everything that they can to improve themselves, their situation, who would be an asset to our society in every possible way, but who have that chance taken from them by people who often are not qualified to make that decision, who are simply providing people higher up in the political spectrum, political cover at the cost of people who have spent often decades behind bars. Thank you, Prashani.
Thank you, Alex. Essentially tonight, what we're covering are the myths of release. The myths of release of the black tar pit that is the prison industrial complex. So when we talk tonight and we move further into this conversation about parole, pardons, and commutations, these are the things that are dangled, that are put front and center in our society in a way to mislead and misguide anybody who doesn't pay close attention and doesn't actually understand the mechanisms of how these things work. And so, Alex, thank you for that, those personal anecdotes around parole. And I feel like everyone in this room was really in solidarity with you, shaking their head as like, yeah, we've heard these nightmare stories before, and it's time for all of the American people to hear them. So without further ado, I'll get off my mini soapbox there. Lewis, are you with us right now? I see you're off camera. Just, aha, there you are, sir. Welcome. I'd love to turn the mic over to you if you are ready.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I appreciate everyone in their thought leadership and just this convening of mind, body, spirit, and subject matter expertise. I'm not one to belabor a point, but I do want to illustrate one of several things. First and foremost, I represent the Reform Alliance, and the woman who, Alex, who articulated so profoundly the issues that we face in our American legal system as it relates to both probation and parole, and also highlighting the issue of Meek Mill. I work for an organization that Meek Mill and Jay-Z co-founded called the Reform Alliance. And our specific mission, our specific existence, what it is that we do is to focus explicitly on probation and parole reform in all four corners of our country and everywhere in between. Why is that? Why is that our focus? I'm glad that you asked that question because I have the answer. There are approximately 2.2 million people who are currently incarcerated. However, there's approximately 5 million people who are under some form of supervision. And on any given day, there are more than 14,000 people who are returned back into our jails and prisons, not because they committed a new crime, not because they went out and stole a car, not because some old lady got hit on the top of her head and her pocketbook was dragged from under her arm, not because there was something that was egregious that happened. These people are returned back into custody because they fraternized with someone who very well could have had a felony conviction. But it doesn't stop there. They're returned back into custody because they were in the presence of alcohol. Not that they consumed alcohol, they were just in the presence of alcohol, but it doesn't stop there. They were returned back into custody because they had to choose between going to the employment opportunity at 3:30 and versus showing up at their supervised release office at 3:30. And because they didn't make the appointment, and if they get an officer on any given day, if whether or not he or she had a bad moment, then that technically they could be violated. These people, 14,000 every single day, are returned back into custody, not because they committed new crimes, but simply because they experience what we call a technical violation. Now you think about it. Let's think about this. I'm a basketball fan, right? I love basketball. I used to play a little bit of basketball before my knees started acting crazy the moment that I got over 35. And when you play basketball, there's something that is called a technical foul or a technical violation. And a technical violation basically might mean that if you're dribbling the ball and if you travel, that means, hey, we got to stop the game and the ball goes to the other team. The referee doesn't come with a pair of handcuffs and cart you off. You don't get expelled out of the game. You don't get kicked off the team because you committed a technical violation. You just don't do it. So why are we expelling human potential outside of our communities? Why is human potential being returned back into a place where they can't thrive? They can't be contributing members of society, where their genius, all of the genius that they have, all of the soul power that they have, all of the fill in the blank that they have, they can't add value to the community that we want them to thrive in. Why is that possible? Look, this is the United States of America. I personally believe that Republicans at their best believe in liberty. I believe that Democrats at their best believe in justice, but all of us as Americans should be believing in liberty and justice, not for some, not for 3/4 of the country, not for 99% of the country, but liberty and justice for all. And so we're diligent about recycling in this country. We're extremely diligent about making sure that compost goes in the compost container and the plastic goes in a plastic container and the food goes in a food container. Why is it that we are so careless about human potential? Why is it that we are so careless about not ensuring that people are not just released from prison, but when they get out, we are giving them a springboard to success rather than perpetuating the trapdoor to failure. Look, when you are under probation, it is a nightmare that makes Elm Street look like Sesame Street. Now, you have to be older than 35 in order to really appreciate that analogy. Google Freddy Krueger. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there's always this constant boogeyman creeping over your shoulder. And the moment that you go visit your friends who very well, or family members who very well may have a felony conviction, you mean to tell me that if I'm having a 4th of July cookout, or if I'm having a birthday party to celebrate something, or if you have an individual who's being released and you got family who shows up at the house, and it just so happens that during the release party, the supervised release officer wants to stop by to make sure that everything is copacetic, and he or she sees somebody else on their caseload, they're at the party. You mean to tell me that this person runs the risk of being returned back into custody? That is completely asinine. That is completely ridiculous. So our focus at the Reform Alliance is simply to highlight the probation and parole trap. Probation and parole were designed to be an alternative to incarceration, so people can pay their debt to society and be redirected back to work without wasting prison space. But instead, these systems, they are creating a series of trapdoors that lock people back up. Again, not for committing new crime, but often for things like showing up a few minutes late to an appointment or crossing a city line to pick up their child for school. They become systems that prepare people for prison, not for productivity. Let me say that one more time for the people in the back, in the event if you were buffering when I said it the first time. What has happened with our probation and parole system is that it has become a system that prepares people for prison and not for productivity. Look, I often say this, Dr. Reese, if the correction system, if the probation system and parole system, if they were a Fortune 100 company, they would have been ran out of town a long time ago. Why is that? I'm glad that you thought the question, because I have the answer for you. Reason being is because they are the only departments of government that is rewarded for failure. If you get arrested on a Thursday and you come back with 3 of your friends on a Monday, they get more funding in the next fiscal year for projected people that may be in their custody. Think about that. We are rewarding them for failure. And what we need to do is reimagine we need to reimagine what it looks like for a warden. We need to make sure that we are rewarding them to keep people out of prison, to reduce their population, not to get people locked up, not to make sure that you bring your friend back and that friend brings their friend back and that friend brings another friend back. No. We need to shift the paradigm of how we think about how our tax dollars are going towards literally subsidizing a government institution where we are not getting an appropriate return on our investment. I served nearly 14 years in federal prison. You know how long 14 years is? That's 14 years. Imagine all of the things that has happened to you in a 14-year period. Imagine how much hair you lost. Imagine how many relationships you done been in. Imagine all of the things, all of the people that you lost. Imagine all of these things that you've experienced in nearly 14 years. And after I served nearly 14 years, I had approximately 5 years under supervised release on the federal level. After that term of supervision was suspended prematurely, thank God. Then I was rearrested in part for child support arrears that accrued while I was incarcerated. And then, Alex, the court said, hey, we don't care that you had a felony conviction 20 years ago. There are no statute of limitations when you come back into a courtroom, even though I hadn't had a state conviction. And they put me on probation for child support arrears that accrued while I was incarcerated. And then while I'm on probation, I receive a technical violation because a property that I own in upstate Connecticut, someone made a prank telephone call. The police show up, choke slam me. The entire thing is on video. And I got a technical violation simply because I got arrested, not because I was guilty. This is the system. This is the system. This is our American legal system. This is the system that we are challenged with. So this is what my charge to you is. If that incests you, if that pissed you off, if you want to do something about it, if you feel as though that it's not fair, it's not justice, it's not right, I want to challenge you to do something. I want to challenge you to not just sit on your righteous, indignant high horse right now. I want to challenge you to get involved. I'm unapologetically Christian. And one of the things that I realize is everyone likes to think of themselves as a good Samaritan. If there was a baby dangling from the 5th floor of a building, I'm certain that Alex would take off her blazer and try to catch that child. I'm certain that Dr. Reese would try to cradle her arms or climb up like Spider-Woman. However, when you really examine the premise of the Good Samaritan, what he did first and foremost, he saw a need. He saw that there was an injured person. There are people who are injured by our American legal system right now. There are families that are injured because people are being disproportionately sentenced, excessively prosecuted, and returned back to prison for technical violations. People are hurting. But what the Good Samaritan did was he got off of his place of privilege. He got off of his high horse and he got down and he met the person right where the need was. And so we have a need tonight. The need is we need to shift this culture of incarceration, this culture of remanding people because of technical violations. And how can we do that? Simply, you can text the word reform to 81411. It's that simple. You text the word reform to 81411 and you will be rocking with the best. Jay-Z, Meek Mill, Robert F. Smith, Mike Rubin, who owns the Philadelphia 76ers, and yours truly, Louis L. Reed. It doesn't get much better than that. And so as I close, I just want you to know this. There's enough soul power. There's enough intellectual subject matter expertise on this call by the people who are watching and the people who you are going to hear from, where we can literally change this world overnight. And I believe that we can, I believe that we will, and I also believe that we should. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Louis, for that very spirited parlay into the conversation tonight. You have me energized. That's exciting and awesome. I just want you to know people in the chat are energized as also. We had some comments. I just wanted to point out, Yashel Davis wrote, the death sentence is the same as working a slave to death because incarceration was designed to replace slavery. Same folks, same mindset. And that really plays into what we've talked about already tonight, which is if you have the same people who are running the plantation, you cannot then put the responsibility of who gets to come home in those same hands and expect different results. So next up, we have Donna Robinson from RAP. Donna, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. Oh, Louis, you almost got me getting ready to play for your team. However, I am the organizer in Buffalo for Release Aging People in Prison. And our platform is predicated on our elderly, those who have been forgotten about. I was born in 1955. I'm just going to save a lot of you doing the math. I'm 66 years old. And just like you, Alex, the same story in Michigan, it's happening right here in New York State. I'm a transplant to New York State. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I moved to Buffalo about 40 years ago when my baby was a baby. He had been in and out of the carceral system from the age of 16 until 2 years ago. He was returned. Returned, redeemed. Mom, I'm never going back again. He's got an essential worker's job, a new car, a good woman, a home. He's making me proud. And that's why I believe in redemption and second chances. Up here in New York State, it boggles my mind that there are 52 prisons in 62 counties. That's almost, I'm not talking about the jails, that prisons, that is almost a prison for every county. To me, that makes no sense. I'm an abolitionist. I've been saying this all the while. Let's tear down the prisons and plant marijuana. All right, we passed it now. It's legal. We don't have to hide. We can come out in the open, roll up our trees, sit down. Everything's Irie month. The prison system is a cash cow, and it is getting rich off the backs of our Black, brown, Latinx, incarcerated loved ones. Earlier, you elicited that I'm also the mother of a daughter serving a sentence of 15 to life. My daughter's 46 years old. I'm no stranger to the carceral system. It started when I was 7 years old in New Jersey. I lived with my grandmother. My grandmother's, one of her older sons was incarcerated at the state penitentiary. Every other Sunday after church, as if sitting up in church wasn't bad enough for 3 hours with people throwing those fur coats in your face and scaring you because they're shouting. I had to go with my grandmother to this penitentiary to visit her son, my uncle. To say the least, I was traumatized. As old as I am now, I can still hear those gates clanging. I can still see those fat, sweaty, greasy guards stabbing my grandmother's dinners. At holiday time, she would stand up at the sink, at the stove for 3 days, cooking anything and everything under the sun. And let me tell you, my grandmother could cook so good, she could cook the bumper off your car. And you would be like, oh man, that was the best. And to watch them stab her sweet potato pies, her chocolate cakes, her greens, everything, as if my grandmother would be trying to hide anything in them good victuals. I had to endure that. My penance, we would stop at Dairy Queen on the way home. An ice cream cone, no, that didn't suppress my trauma, that didn't make what I was going through any less. And to see what my grandmother went through, I told my children when they were young, I can't do that. If you ever got in trouble, I couldn't do those visits. Don't ever say what you can't do. I would go through hell with gasoline drawers on for any of my 4 children. They got my best one, my daughter. I make no bones about it. I got sick in 2000. I needed a liver transplant. She said, Mommy, I'll give you my liver. The doctor said, your mom would need a cadaver. That meant somebody would have to die in order for me to live. I was in my 50s. I had all my children. I didn't have a husband. I gave up the ghost. I went online. I tried to make my funeral arrangements. The computer shut down. I'm sitting here 21 years later. I kicked COVID's ass in April. I'm here. God is keeping me for a reason. And it has to be so that I can give a voice to the voiceless. I can fight for those who can't fight for themselves. Rap is giving me that voice. This is an organization that was started by people who were incarcerated for decades and decades that nobody thought would come home. They fought, they came home. This is their vision. So that nobody would have to die, separated from their families, behind bars, nobody thinking about it. I'm not an organizer. I wish you could see my dining room table. But they said, you get out here. These are our bills, fair and timely parole. Which means if you've served 15 years or more of your sentence, go before the parole board. Let them look at you for who you are now, not who you were on the worst day of your life. That crime you could never change. That's the only thing that'll never change. But you can change. Give them a shot. Don't give them that rubber stamp, denied to be released back into their community. Elder parole. You're 55 years and older. We didn't make that up. The Department of Corruption in the state of New York, no, they're not correcting anything. Let's get the language right, people. This is 2021. Let's stop putting lipstick on the pig, because she's still gonna be ugly. Prison is ugly on all levels. And I sat on the side of my bed, getting ready to give it up when my daughter went away. But suicide is not an option for a single Black woman who's a great grandmother. So I had to put my big girl Vicky's on. I have to get out here. My daughter, she's in Bedford Hills. For those of you who don't know, it's a maximum facility for women in New York State. We have 3 prisons for women. 3 prisons for women. You've taken the men out the house, you locked them up. You left us to our own devices to do what we have to do to survive. Now you come and you're taking us out the home. Who's raising the children? But you wonder why the children are out of control. Why is crime still rising? Because just because you hold people in prison for 50, 60, 70 years, crime is not going to stop. And that's where they got it twisted. Now, as I listened, my daughter's 46. Both of these bills that we are trying to pass in New York State through our organization, the People's Campaign for Parole Justice and Release Aging People in Prison, would not be a get out of jail free card. And this is where the fear mongering comes in. You know, oh, first of all, our parole board is not fully staffed. It's got positions for 19 people. I think maybe 16 of them are filled. Most of them are law enforcement. I want people on the parole board that look like me. I want people making bills that look like me. I want this shit corrected or tear it down, because it's designed to fail. And it's working the way they designed it, but it's not working for us. In New York State, more than 53% of the people incarcerated are Black. Now, how is that fair? No, it's racially disparaged. And we have to meet people where they are. What happened to you on that day? Everybody, it's not a criminality. Sometimes it's something mental. And we have to stop putting everybody in the same prison together. It's a melting pot for disaster. Right across the street from my daughter at Bedford is another one, right across the parking lot to Connick, a medium facility for women. And then farther upstate, where I am in Buffalo, which is actually 350 miles away from my daughter, mind you. I have to get there any way I can, by any means necessary. I'm going to visit mine. But they have another medium facility up here closer to me with women who are welders. They make every bit of metal fabrication in New York State government offices, the grills that are in the park. They weld them in Bedford Hills. Oh, you're calling up for the DMV about your driver's license? You don't know who you talking to. You talking to somebody who's incarcerated making pennies. But when they come home, that scarlet letter that brands all of them says, you're a convicted felon. You don't deserve a good job. You can't get that job at DMV. You can't get a job as a welder. You cannot get decent housing. You don't have your medical in place. You don't have a home to go to. You are literally, again, perpetually punished by the state of New York. As Jay-Z or Meek might say, you're given the jug. You're given the jug. And it's not right. Clemency. Oh, our ex-governor, Andrew Slomo. Yes, he was in office all those years. He granted clemency to a handful of people. It was only after he was given the boot that he added maybe 6 more names. Are you kidding me? You got 1,000 applications for clemency on your desk, and you sitting up writing a book about how you saved New York State during a pandemic. No. We had to advocate. We had to fight so that they would be given masks. Oh, they were bottling hand sanitizer, chained to a machine in the summertime, bottling hand sanitizer with the fire department standing by, because heat, alcohol do not mix. If a fire had broken out, all of those individuals who were working like slaves would have perished. But he wanted credit for saving New York State during a pandemic. When you have incarcerated people digging graves, making coffins, and you got time to sit down and write a book. Well, I said I'd tear the pages out that book and use them for toilet paper, because he was full of sugar honey iced tea. For those of you Christians don't cuss, I got a mouth like a sailor. But anywho, it is imperative now more than ever that we stop it. Stop the shenanigans, people. People are dying. I have friends and comrades that I advocate with whose husbands have been incarcerated for 30, 35 years or more. I hear them crying behind me, and I think about my daughter. That was my best friend. She took me on a cruise. She got me a passport. I had no time or desire. I'm working as a single parent trying to raise my children. I had no time for such frivolities. My daughter showed me a life that I might never have seen. Not only while she was home, but now that she's inside and I go and visit her and I see women as older than me. Miss Valerie Gator, she's the reason that I got on my soapbox and I started speaking out, because somehow I think when you think about somebody incarcerated, you think about a big Black man, but they're holding our mothers, our aunts, our sisters, our wives hostage. And they need to be home with their children. They need to come home. I want mine to come home, because I've heard the stories that even though they've been given 15, they can serve 30, 35. I don't have that kind of time. Her children don't have that kind of time. Her grandchildren don't have that kind of time. So we need to get on board. rapcampaign.com. Look at our bills. See what you can do from wherever you are. Even though you might not be in New York State, you might have friends or family. Get them involved. The People's Campaign for Parole Justice. That's a whole platform, a whole plank of criminal justice bills that need to be passed to change around this criminal injustice system. I don't want what happened to Miss Val. She had a 50 to life sentence. She served 41 years. She mentored my daughter and every other woman that came in there from the time that she was 19 years old. The superintendent who was there when she came in came back to give her eulogy. She wouldn't have been eligible for parole for another 9 years. They misdiagnosed her with acid reflux, heartburn. My grandmother used to say, get your tablespoon of baking soda, put in some water, burp, you'll be fine. 2 weeks before she died, they told her, oh, it was esophageal cancer. She never got to the parole board. She had put in place many programs there as a mentor, an outstanding human being. I don't want that same fate to befall anyone else, but it seems to be happening. People who have been granted parole right here in my backyard, they go before the parole board after serving almost 40 years. One gentleman in particular, Mr. Saleh Abdullah, he was ready to come home, get back with his daughter, start his business with his brother. He asked to be excused to go to the restroom. He took an excessively long time, so they sent the guard in. They found Mr. Saleh on the floor. He'd had a stroke. They rushed him down here to the hospital. He never got to cross over that threshold to come home. And his story's only one of many. This shit has got to stop. Oops. I'm unapologetic because that's what it is. This is insane on so many levels. I appreciate being on a panel with such esteemed speakers and guests. I'm honored. And to you, Mr. Robles, I wish you all the best, brother. Thank you for coming back to us. Thank you all. Stay well, stay blessed. Look on our website. We got a lot going on. Get involved. Like Lewis said, get involved. Don't just think that what you say won't matter. Because if you keep saying it enough, trust and believe somebody's going to hear you. No longer will I sit in the corner to be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much for sharing the speakers on this panel tonight. Y'all are so powerful, so moving. Thank you for bringing your vulnerability and your truth to the table. I just want to reiterate what Donna said. Some links have been popped in the chat for RAP, Release Aging People for Prison. You can donate to the cause, you can get involved. And I definitely want to reiterate what Donna said, which is that everybody has a place in this fight. Every single person in this country, if you care about the youth, then you need to care about mass incarceration. If you care about elderly people, you need to get involved with ending mass incarceration. If you care about racial and economic justice in this country, you cannot do that without ending mass incarceration. And I won't get started, but you all have filled me with the spirit.
No, get started.
I'm just appreciative. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Raphael to share his story and experience with parole, what it's like coming back, and anything that you want to chime in on. The floor is all yours. If he comes off mute, he's looking for the mute button. There you go.
Hello. I'm not really prepared. A friend reached out to me a couple of days ago and asked me to participate, so I did. I'm really not sure what this is for or about. I'm sorry about that. But I was incarcerated as a teenager. I went to prison at 16, spent 20 plus years in prison, got out on parole at 37, and really hit the ground running, didn't look back, made the best of what I could, and just been enjoying life. And that's pretty much what I got. Not really dwelling on negative stuff. And like I said, I've been pretty lucky and blessed, and my life has been great. And I take it as a responsibility to do the right things and, you know, make an opportunity for the next person in line if they can get it. Really, that's kind of what I stand on. And I mean, I don't know, don't really have much more than that. I could ask questions if people have any, but you know, I apologize. I'm at work and I'm just hit a hotspot on my laptop, and so I'm sitting in my truck. So I don't know.
No need to apologize.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no need to apologize. No need to apologize at all. We're excited that you're home, that you've been returned to the community. We wish you all of the success. We're just grateful that you joined us tonight to be a part of the conversation. And I mean, you're working, which is what so many people, when they come home from being incarcerated, that's what they like get to doing. And people on the inside, most people that I know would give anything for the opportunity to be able to just come home and do a good day's work and contribute to their family and their community. So we're glad you're back. Welcome.
I have a question.
Oh, I know this.
What's up, Ralphie?
Okay.
Let me ask you this, Ralph. Me and you, we pretty close started together.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna disclose that we were off the chain inside for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Where do you feel your change came? Because I often express where mine comes from, but I don't want to impose on what you believe. But where do you feel, or who do you feel the most powerful change inside this system came for you?
I always kind of joke about it, but I had gotten in trouble, obviously, and I was put in the hole as administrative confinement. And growing up, being involved in gangs, being around other kids and peer pressure, I essentially did whatever my friends did or whatever people I thought cool did. Well, I got put in the hole for about 2 years by myself. And I think my change started there because I became an individual over that time. Like when you're in a room by yourself, like no one's smarter than you, no one's stronger than you, no one, basically you're number one there. So you can build confidence and be you and learn to like you, I guess. And that, I mean, I guess it can go the other way. I'm not an advocate for the whole, but I'm just saying, me personally, that's where I feel like change happened for me. And then from that point on, I just, you know, matured, grew up. And then when I got let out, I made the most.
And when you made the change inside, did it change your perspective of who you was looking at on the yard and starting to think, you know, somebody has something there? Because this will translate, however that translates to you, into how parole, probation, whatever, that the systems they have where we are navigating them, even when it seems like they're not, well, I don't think it seems, that's my perspective. I seem it drastically hinders me in many aspects and always has a leash to pull me in. So you said you followed basically just the homies. We fed into each other and drove the madness, and then you got a separation where you got to reflect.
Right.
And then you stepped out of the hole when you started embracing your change. What did that give you, the perspective of the individuals on the yard that were more of somebody that was a role model?
Well, you mean like someone that I looked up to afterwards or prior to?
Prior to release, that kind of hit, because that's most, we still connected with people because we're trapped in there. But
yeah,
because I was hearing about you when I was in work release, and I was like, so we didn't see each other for like 15 years. And the
Yeah.
last time we seen each other, we was off the chain. And then they're talking about, oh, Ralphie's doing this program and Ralphie's advocating for this.
Right. I just I mean, I guess for me, I just kind of got fed up, you know, and I just wanted to be free, wanted to have more. Like I was like a lot of people, I felt duped, you know, because when you live that life, you really can only have the power to like ruin people's lives or hurt people. It's not something that my conscience could continue to participate in, I guess. But in terms of incarceration, I started to just see the, like, you know, everyone talks about the fairs or whatever. There's an inability to distinct the difference between a problem and a non-problem. It's a huge shortcoming in there. So they treat everybody the same, you know. So if you come up with the worst possible scenario, they'll treat everyone according to that, you know. And so it's simple, it's easy, it's the easy cop out way. It's, you know, and you know, there's always somebody in there that wants to do the right thing, like a staff member or something. And I feel like they shine through. They don't last long, but you know, they get burned out basically. But in terms of inmates, it would just be like usually people that just manage to stay positive through all that stuff. And you know, you'd wonder like, dang, how could you be so happy all the time? You know, so
Yeah.
just kind of talk to them, people that seek out education, whatever. But you know, like I said, I knew that when I got out, I wanted to stay out and not be a statistic the wrong way, you know. So someone else, because I'm lucky, you know, there's people that commit the same crime I committed that will never get out. And they didn't do anything worse than me. I didn't do anything better than them. And so, and there's people that will get another chance. And so they're not going to be able to use my name to hold someone down, I guess, you know. So
Part of your accountability is making sure the next person doesn't suffer the cost for it, is what you're saying.
yes.
And then I guess what I was just saying is my change came with the investment of the brothers I seen they're doing things with themselves. And then I get out, and then just what you said, I literally watched the parole board. And as some people know, I went and argued with the commutation board for Ernest Jackson. But I literally watched them say, not this person. And I mean, these are examples of people, when they say a person go in a system and they can change. It's a terrible system, but people can change in the worst conditions. And prison's one of the worst conditions we have in this society. And I see them change. And I've seen dozens and dozens of them. And we used to mock them as little gang members, as going to church and reading their book all the times and always talking to me about, you know, maybe I should look at something different. And then I come to see what they're really about. And then I see the parole board turn them down again and again. I see the commutation board won't look at individuals, yet they're the only board, like in our state, 3 people won't use the power for anybody. Always has an excuse. And at some point, because this board right here is about parole, pardon, you know, them powers, this particular panel that we're having now. And these entities and individuals have the power to change things. And if the system's all about punishment for when you do something, and then their claim of reform when you change, and then their claim of reinvestment back into society from that change, why are we as a society not holding them accountable for not doing what they say, for keeping people in there so long that their change goes backwards? Because now they're getting bitter. Now they're just seeing people that change their life, as Donna said, 20, 30 years, and then dying in there instead of actually getting a human treatment and starting to look at this. Here in Nebraska, I truly believe in the past 5 years, our prison has become worse than it has ever become because of the way those who are running our system are running our system.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason, sorry. We actually had a question come through for Raphael. I apologize for interjecting, but I wanted to make sure that we address the question that came through. So Raphael, one of the attendees wanted to know, is there something that you would like to see changed to help when people get out?
You mean changed? I mean, I guess I'm a believer in the individual. I feel like if it's in someone to succeed, I mean, they can. And there's definitely challenges, but I think just more employment opportunities, which, you know, we're out here, everyone knows there's a zillion of those right now. No one really wants to work. So I don't know what needs to change. I mean, I think that people need to be given parole almost mandatorily, you know, because it's a challenge to go up to the pro board every year and get laid down. I mean, I would go and they wouldn't even talk to me. They'd just stare at me, which, you know, if they would say something mad or just give me something to think about, I don't know, but they would just stare at me for however long and ask me if I had anything. And, you know, obviously I would speak my piece, but it's hard to stay positive. And, you know, so like, it was just my determination to be more accomplished every year, like almost make a mockery, like how more ridiculous is this parole denial gonna be this year? Like, you know, and then when they gave it to me, I was just forgot all that, was grateful and just kept moving. I guess that's how I looked at it. It was just like, whatever.
Yeah. But I'm really glad you actually brought up something as we sort of wind down this conversation. It's called presumptive parole. And it's something that is used in many other countries, and us in this world here where we're using this language now. And I urge everyone, talk about a call to action. When you are talking to people, your friends and your family, and they know nothing about these systems, talk to them about things like presumptive parole. Just explain it to them. It literally means that somebody is presumed to get parole at this date, done. And if the state wants to keep somebody, they have to actually allocate their resources to fight to keep somebody, as opposed to everyone else on the inside having to make the case to come home. It reverses it. And in many ways, it would actually solve a lot of the problems that we are dealing with, which is that if your entire system is flooded with people who are coming up for parole, your resources are taxed. Your people can't make decisions on a timely basis. We're talking about human beings' lives here. We're not talking about people just waiting for, you know, I don't know, something from Amazon to be delivered, although maybe that would mean everybody comes home in an hour, but you get my point. And so then we'd reverse it. And then the resources would actually be focused on whoever the state has identified as quote unquote, you know, their most egregious cases, which, you know, I hate that language, but it would start the process of getting the system to be forced to allow our loved ones to come home in much larger numbers than they're able to right now. If
then they would have to admit something, which they don't want to admit, which is that people can change.
Oh, right. Well, that's the other thing, Alex, which in my opinion, I don't think that the index offense, which is the original crime, should be revisited at a parole hearing. I think
it shouldn't be allowed.
That's what I mean. I believe it should, after a certain number of years, like let's say in a case of homicide, like 10 years, for instance, I think after 10 years, if somebody's up for parole before 10 years, then maybe fine, maybe. But I think if somebody's done a certain amount of time, there is no point for us. I don't ever think there's ever a point, but there's no point to go back and bring up the emotionally evocative details of an index offense to just re-traumatize everybody and re-traumatize the person who's inside trying to show that they are a different person 10, 15, 20, 40 years from the day of their worst mistake. But okay, that's my soapbox. So Alex, go.
Actually, just want to add something interesting to this. So I was actually on a call today giving testimony to the Massachusetts State Legislature on an LWAP bill, an end of life without parole bill. And I listened to many people say that, you know, this is the just thing going forward. And then I listened to family members who told gruesome stories of what had happened. And as somebody who's also a survivor of crime myself, who was not willing to put the person who was the perpetrator into prison, I decided to share that story on this legislature, even though like technically as a staff member of the sentencing project, that's usually not the way that I go. I usually go with, you know, all of the well done research that we share. And the thing that became clear to me, and I almost wish I could reach out to those people, is that I always say like retribution, you know, having damage and then inflicting more damage doesn't heal you. Like, I wish I could share that with them, that, you know, that is like swallowing poison and waiting for someone else to die. But, you know, forgiveness, restorative justice, responsibility, all of these things are the things that actually heal us. And the fact that people improve themselves to such an incredible extent, are not given a second chance, you're actually damning yourself with that as well. It's something that comes up often at parole hearings, because one of the things that everybody was speaking about was having to like relive things at parole hearings. And what I wanted to say was like, then stop.
Right.
Stop reliving things that you can do nothing about.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I very much appreciate that point. And as Donna just dropped in the chat, the courts don't really care about the victims once the person is convicted. So
And sometimes they don't care about them before.
Oh, I mean, let's just be real. As a survivor of violence, I was used as a tool to incarcerate another person. That's what my testimony was used for. So we do have a question that got popped in the chat. Rachel is asking about, what about housing as a challenge for parolees? So Raphael, I don't know if you've had any experiences with that, if you want to speak to that. Maybe Donna, if you have any thoughts too. We have a couple more minutes left.
I had already had housing kind of lined up, so I didn't really have that challenge. I know that where I live, it's virtually impossible to get a nice place with a felony or without any credit, which most people coming out of prison don't have. You know, you have a felony and like zero credit history, which is worse than bad credit, I learned. But you know, so it's just stuff you got to learn and deal with. And luckily I was in a position to have a place to go from family, and then, you know, was able to purchase a home after a few years of saving up. So I didn't have to go through that. But I mean, it's definitely an issue because of where you're forced to live because of the circumstances.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Donna, I don't know if you, especially working for RAP, like what has been the experience of what's been the challenges for people coming home with housing?
Well, just as Raphael alluded to, that scarlet letter, that conviction of a felony. For example, if your mother or your wife lives in subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, or some type of a project housing, it clearly states on the lease that if you've been convicted of a felon, you can't live there. So by that person not being able to be paroled to that home, they have to go to a shelter. We have re-entry programs here in Buffalo to work with people when they come home to get them suitable housing. My daughter owned her own home. My daughter worked from the age of 14 until her incarceration in the bank. When I tell you, she got out of HSBC in 2015, right as they divested, she got a 401k of over $100,000. That's why the crime that she confessed to is ludicrous. She owned her own home. Once they found out that my daughter was gone, they went through that house like Grant went through Richmond. I mean, they took everything, the pictures off the wall. What are you gonna do with my daughter's pictures? But that's not gonna stop. When she comes home, and she is coming home, I got her set up. Your credit cards, just like you left them. If I have to move from where I am, you can have this spot. She is not going to be without a support system. She has friends that she's been grew up with, high school. They have homes, Virginia, Florida, Georgia. you can come and stay with us. That's not going to be an issue. She's got a support system. What I'm advocating for is the clean slate bill up here in New York State, so that once they're released, according to the commission of the crime, because you know they want carve outs, they don't do a background check. They can live where they want. They can work where they want. I'm advocating for those people, the ones that don't have family and don't have a support system. But it takes everybody to stand up and help out your brother, your sister. These people are coming back into the community. They're going to be mentors. They might stop that young man, that young woman from committing that crime that could ruin the rest of their life. So it's imperative that we get involved. I know it's hard, it's time consuming, because advocates don't get any sleep. I can tell you, see the bags. You got to do something. You just can't sit there in your Victoria's Secrets and your Joe Boxers and just, oh, wow, that's a shame. No, you got to do something.
Thank you so much. Just reiterate, there is a place for everyone in this fight. If you care about housing for people who come home, if you care about felony laws that prevent people from getting jobs, there is a place for every person to have a niche or a broad interest in ending mass incarceration. I urge everyone who's attending tonight to get involved, even if it just means that you'll make a commitment to talk to a friend or a family member who doesn't know how the criminal justice system works and some of the common pitfalls that we talked about tonight with parole technical violations, with commutations, which we didn't even really get to, which let's just say that's the equivalent of winning the lottery. You don't get them. And how we opened tonight, which is that somebody who is on death row, who literally had the Pope and the former governor of Missouri ask for a stay of execution. And it was blatantly ignored. And so we need everyone in this country to be outraged. We need everyone in this country to get involved. And I'm just checking the chat really quick. How is accountability achieved for those in charge? They seem to have none. Definitely much more like a comment. And I think everyone in this room can agree. Yeah, there's absolutely no accountability. This is one of the reasons that we have these panel discussions, to talk and educate people in our country to understand. There are many people who, when they think of the prison system, if they think of it at all, which they don't have to, but if they do think of the prison system, they assume that the way the system is set up is set up in a logical, rational fashion. And to again quote Donna from earlier, semi-quote Donna from earlier, the system is set up exactly how it's set up, to destroy the lives of our loved ones and tear apart our communities. The system isn't broken. It is built the way that it is meant to be built, to continue to perpetuate injustices for very specific groups of people in this country.
I
have a
believe
couple
there's
minutes
another
left.
way. And I think
Jason.
we're doing it. I just want to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
just being a regular old person who also messed up big time, but the other way is exposure. And I can give a few examples. I often bring up the Ernest Jackson one because his case is so ridiculous, but there's people who didn't care nothing about the system and read that case and completely woke up and started looking into the system. Derek Dixon is another one who actually committed a crime, burglary, and a lady had a heart attack in '85, and they gave him life here in Nebraska. So he's been in prison longer than some people, and I believe everybody get a chance, but I just use these examples. Some people who have intentionally done things like rape or murder, we have a state that says, oh, we got these felony murder is what they did, a crime that happened, and then they gave him murder. And he's been in 30-something years, and there's no accountability in the system saying we have the governor saying, innocence not for me to judge. I got power of commutations. I got power. So we need to expose them. And since we have social media and this country's in love with social media, then our social media should be full of these cases. We should, when we hear about a case, we should go look at it, pick it out, making sure nobody's not feeding us garbage, because we don't want to sit there and put things out and then realize we're fake news. We want to be telling the truth and putting cases out, specifying in people, because that gives it a personal example, and putting it out there so people can see the truth in this, that this is a system that's made to demolish. And yes, some of us have great cases where we said, I've overcome, but that doesn't discount one bit from the harm that this system's doing to the individual, from the fake justice it's doing to the victims, and from the harm it's doing to the whole community as a whole. So exposure.
Jamie, who I mentioned at the top of this panel, the Senate Minority Leader put his commutation packet on the governor's desk. She has not looked at it.
Right. We only have a minute left, and we did get one last question for Raphael, who is now like literally in the dark, but I'm going to ask you anyway, sir. What did the prison system not teach you that you wish they would have to better mediate your transition home?
What did that not teach me?
That you wish they would have?
Shoot. I don't know. I'm kind of on the spot, I guess. What do I
Don't mean to
wish?
put you on the spot.
Yeah, what do I wish the system would have taught me? I don't know. I never really felt like the system really wanted me to succeed at all. So I mean, I don't know how to put that into one thing, but I felt like people that succeed literally is in spite of the system, period. That's my perspective.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, everyone, want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much to all of our panelists who came and spoke with such fire and passion. Raphael, Donna, Louis, Alex, thank you so much. And Jason for chiming in and giving me that assist there. I appreciate everybody. Join us for our last two panels in 2 weeks. On October 19th, we will be talking about restorative justice. Hope to see everybody there, and have a good night. Be well and be safe.
Thank you so much for having me.
And me as well. It's a pleasure. Bless you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.